Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new live stream. I have what I think is a super cool topic. And if you look at the poll that I posted in the comments, obviously the comments are here for me, you will see that other people are also interested in it. So today I'm going to be talking about Apple search ads. But before we jump into it, I'm going to do my usual. And I will invite you to tell me what's in your cup. I am drinking Earl Grey tea, my favorite, in an App Figures mug, and I'm here in New York City. Tell me where you're from, what's in your cup, anything goes. If you're drinking water, if you're drinking soda water, if you're drinking a beer, if it's that time, it's beer o'clock somewhere, I imagine. Or if it's coffee, I have a little cup of espresso too, just in case it's that kind of a morning, and I think I say that every live stream, but that's usually how it is. Although if you follow me on Twitter, you'll know that today I was set up a little bit earlier than normal. I'm not sure how or why, but it just worked. It was nice. It was nice. I will aim to do that again all the time. In any case, tell me what you are drinking, what's in your cup, as we wait for people to shuffle in. I'm looking at the comments, and we'll go from there. And there's a poll in the comments, which I mentioned before. If you're doing Apple search ads or not doing Apple search ads, answer that poll to let me know what's up. I'm already seeing results that I kind of semi-expected, but only semi-expected, which is it's definitely interesting. So I expect to see, I don't know, I expected to see something a little bit different, but that's good. That's really, really good. We're going to get to talk about why, or we're going to get to talk about why these results are surprising and how to fix them, because there is a fix here. So that's pretty much it. And hopefully you can hear me and see me and everything is good. If there are any problems with the stream, let me know in the comments. The comments are really how we can communicate. So throw a comment in, whether you're on LinkedIn or on YouTube. Even though I primarily do this on YouTube, I'm also restreaming to LinkedIn. So throw anything into the comments and we'll go from there. Ooh, we got a whole bunch of countries again. I see Turkey is in the house. Hello. I see Zurich is in the house. Israel is in the house. Hello, it's kind of late there right now, I think. We're getting there. Brazil, nice. Latvia. Ooh, we're global again. I really love this. We used to do this in our office, like literally in our office, and I would do something very similar, and we'd have a very nice, intimate crowd, 30 to 50-ish people every time, and it was a lot of fun. But doing this live in front of so many people in so many countries is it's as much fun, if not more. I maybe, once everything goes back to normal at some point, we'll do a hybrid live stream from the office, real time, with a live audience. Could be really cool for those of you who are in New York City at that time. Haven't done that yet. We'll get there. We'll get there. Portugal, Germany by flag. Nice. Hungary. Wow. Yeah, we're global again. I really love this. Really, really do. So we're about to get started. I think it's safe to say that we can. There's a lot going on here. I'm pretty excited. And let's see. I'm going through the comments. And my comments are here. This is my second screen in case you're curious why I keep looking here all the time. I do have another screen in here in my teleprompter. It's a whole thing, my setup that I have. But one screen is just not enough. Just rarely enough to do anything good. Austria. Thank you, Jonas. I am really trying with the quality of the stream. Jonas said that the stream quality is amazing. Ukraine is in the house. Portugal. Vietnam is in the house. Georgia. Georgia's in the US. France. Hello, France. This is really cool. Alrighty, so I think we're ready to get started. One more sip from my espresso just so I'm energized to continue. And we'll get right into it. So, hello again. Welcome. My name is Ariel. For those of you who don't know me, I do a lot of things, but I do a lot of analysis on apps. I work with a lot of app developers, everything to make tools, to bring tools to people who are trying to make money with apps through App Figures. If you don't know App Figures, you should go check out App Figures. I should probably have something better to say, but I have a feeling most of you already know App Figures. So if you don't, there's a link in the description. Go check it out for all of your App Figures needs. There will also be a promo code in case you're not on a plan that gives you a lot of this stuff. So I'm actually not going to talk about a lot of this stuff, just a few little things that you can use, but it's mostly all about Apple search ads. So I have been talking to a lot of developers over the last few years. Developers were spending money on Apple search ads. Now, if you look at the poll, and the polls here, a bunch of you are spending money on search ads. And let's look at the most accurate numbers just so we can see it. We have 39% of you are using advanced Apple search ads. That's good. That's really good. We have 19% using basic. Hopefully after this live stream, you're going to go in and delete that completely. Like really, really erase it, make it go away, because basic is bad. Basic is just really terrible. It is how you burn money. I mean, okay, so if you have infinite money, maybe basic is okay. It's not going to give you a lot of results, and it's going to cost you a bunch of money. But hopefully you want to use your money intelligently, and basic is not it. Even in advanced, there are pitfalls. And that's going to be really the main course of today's dinner. That's going to be, how do you not fall into the pitfalls that Apple sets up so you can throw your money away and actually get results out of Apple search ads. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about search ads, a little bit about why search ads are so interesting and why so many developers that have never spent on ads before, even bigger companies, are now putting money into Apple search ads, but also at the same time, right after, set up a campaign and walk you through all those pitfalls. And you might think setting up an Apple search ads campaign is really easy, and it really is. It really, really is. Apple did an amazing job making it super simple, but the super simple is the problem. That's where all the money goes to, really the furnace. Just gets burned away. And when I say burned away, I mean Apple will take it from your bank account, but you're not going to see downloads, and you're not going to see users that will give you that money back, which is the whole goal of Apple search ads. So before we actually jump into Apple search ads, let's talk about the goals of advertising your app. There are really two goals. Most people think there's one goal to get downloads, but that's almost true. And this is important because it helps you set up which campaign you want to set up. So if you think about it, there are two reasons why you would want to have a paid ads campaign, because paid ads cost money. So you have to think about what they're going to give you. So starting with the easy answer is you have a new app, no one knows about it, and if a tree falls in the woods type situation, you want to make sure that people hear it. And so you advertise it for a little bit, and you get that initial momentum, and hopefully you designed your app in a way that people will like it enough, and it will continue to have traction, and you did everything you needed to on the App Store optimization side, meaning the organic side, so the algorithm will start to float it up when people search for whatever the app does. Hopefully. And if you do that, your Apple search ads campaign could be turned off eventually. Depends on the app and depends on how much money you spend and depends on your audience. But the idea is you kickstart as opposed to have something permanent. But that's not the only reason to do that, because in some cases, especially for games, having a permanent campaign is actually really, really good if you have the right economics. So a few weeks ago, I spoke with Martin, who funds apps that have those economics where you put more money into ads and you get more results out of it continuously, consistently. If you have those economics, spending money on ads makes a ton of sense. It doesn't always work, and it doesn't work for most apps. I think games are a lot more likely to have those economics, but in the grand scheme of things, now with subscriptions, it's a little bit easier to get there. But I myself, and if you've been following the channel and follow me, you know that I talk about organic discovery because that's free, and that's a lot better. So from my perspective, if you set up a campaign that has to go on forever, maybe there are better ways to do it. But you might want to do it, and it might make sense for your app, and we're going to look into why that matters. So that's step number one. You have to figure out why your campaign needs to exist. Now, I should mention that if you have any questions, you should drop them into the chat. I will try to look at all of them as I go through this, and then I will also leave time at the end for Q&A. So if you have specific questions about your campaigns or in general about Apple search ads, throw them in. I will get to them, hopefully, as I do this. Also, you might notice that I'm in a new set. I changed my studio altogether. The background before, I got tired of it. So hopefully you'll like this. And if you do, leave me a comment. And if you don't leave me a comment. I don't know. If you do, give the video a like. How about that? I should do that at some point because that's something we should also do. Animations. Okay, so continuing back to search ads. So we started by talking about what are search ads, what ads in general mean. And then you have Apple search ads. And Apple search ads or paid ads are nothing new. Google has been doing them for a long time. Facebook has been doing them for a long time. Instagram, all those. But Apple search ads have this slightly different attraction for developers, especially especially the smaller kind, because you wouldn't go out and spend money on Facebook ads or TikTok ads willy-nilly. But when it comes to Apple search ads, it kind of feels a lot better, right? It feels like you should. Why not? And Apple kickstarted all this with $100 in campaign funding way back when they started it. I don't think they do it anymore. So it was a lot easier to get started, and that's good. But there's really another secret for why Apple search ads are so amazing, and that's because people are coming to the App Store to get something. They're not coming to the App Store to browse. They're not on Facebook just reading things and all of a sudden you appear on their face. They have an intent. And intent is really the best thing you want to optimize for. And that's another thing to keep in mind. We'll talk about keywords in just a little bit because everything is keyword driven, even though Apple search ads will allow you to not have keywords. We'll get to talk about that too. But if you remember exactly why your potential users are looking for your app, you'll make this campaign better. And that's why Apple search ads leads. And that's why I think Apple search ads has a weird monopoly, especially now with app tracking transparency and everything they've been doing to really everyone else. I don't really want to get into it because that's a lot of talk. You're going to get me talking about that for at least 3 live streams back to back, and I will still have stuff to say. And most of it is really opinion. So we're going to skip that altogether. And just remember that they're really good because they're really intentful. And those of you advertising already know this, so I don't need to harp on it anymore. But there's a catch to Apple search ads. They're amazing. They're right at the right place, right time. They're pretty easy to set up. But the catch is they're pretty easy to set up. So Apple went out of its way to make it so that you can, in 1 or 2 or 3 clicks, get a whole campaign up and running. Sounds amazing, right? Why else would you want to tinker with these sort of things? You want it to just work. You want to press some buttons, give it some money, tell it, go make me rich, right? But that sounds like magic, to me at least. I've been running campaigns on Apple search ads and on Google and on Facebook, and even way before the days of mobile apps, because I'm that old. I used to run campaigns for websites, for all sorts of websites, and what feels like a previous lifetime on Google and on other search engines. So from everything I learned, there's just no magical way to have something just work for you and make you rich while you're sleeping and feeding it just a little bit of money and getting a ton. There's just no way to do it. And if anyone tells you they can do it, it's because they're going to do it themselves. And it's not the kind of AI that will do that for you. I do see some questions in the chat. I'll get to that in a second. There's a question about the amount of money that you have to spend. And that's a really good question. So we'll get to that in a moment. But going back to the problem with search ads and the way Apple designed them is they try to make everything automatic. And that's why Apple search ads basic are just bad, bad. Because with Apple search ads basic, for those of you who do it, you know that you have very little to no input. So you can't tell Apple where to show your app. And what ends up happening is Apple shows it in the wrong place. And when Apple shows it in the wrong place, your money just goes down the drain because someone will tap on your ad in a keyword that is irrelevant to that app, and they're not going to do anything with it. And the reason why people will tap on it is because most people don't realize that the first item on the list is an ad. They don't know that it can be there by a manipulated way as opposed to by what they want. So they'll just tap on it, not exactly understanding what's going on. What will end up happening is you're going to end up with a user that doesn't need your app because it's the wrong keyword altogether. And you just spent a ton of money on this keyword, and a ton of money could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But if you spend even 10 cents or a quarter or $1 on a tap that's not going to get you anything, that's $1 that you just put into the shredder. Just imagine in your mind taking $1 and putting it into the shredder in whatever currency you're in. And those numbers are way higher now than what they used to be back in the day because competition is fierce. More people are finding out about this amazing, intentful thing you can use for advertising. And Apple is doing the best it can to make sure they appear in all those keywords, whether they're good or not. So, evil. Anything that automatically puts your app or your ad in front of an audience without you having control over it, evil, bad, waste of money. So, you don't want to do that. I just want to make that clear because I will continue saying this. I've been saying this for a long, long time on Twitter, off Twitter, to people directly. Ultimately, that's, I think, the biggest issue that exists currently with Apple search ads. The problem is most developers will either try it and then see that there are no results and end it, or try to continue to fuel really that sort of bad cycle with their money because they feel like they have to, which is even worse. You don't have to spend money on anything. It's not giving you results. You should stop doing it, or you should do it better. Really, you should do it better. So let me take a quick pause before we jump into how to set up a campaign, and I'm going to take a few questions from the chat. I do remember how to speak most times, so let me jump into the chat. Let's see what's going on. We have a question from Leonardo. Let's bring those up. And Leonardo is asking, what is your estimate of the minimum monthly spend to achieve organic discovery results? In that case, what's a good ballpark of keywords amount? That's a really, really, really tough question. And the reason this is a tough question is because inorganic, meaning paid keywords, don't actually help you organically directly. Meaning just spending money on ads and getting those downloads is going to do very little to your actual organic discovery because downloads don't impact keyword ranks. And I know some people will say that I'm wrong, but I think I've proven that more than enough times in Keyword Teardowns, the series that I write every week where I take a keyword and analyze the results. And I have yet to see one result out of, I think we're coming up on 100 Keyword Teardowns, where the downloads were actually making a big enough obvious difference. So downloads are not what impacts keyword ranks, which is organic discovery. Instead, it's the ratings. So you can say your inorganic downloads, your paid downloads, are getting you more ratings if you optimize, if you have a very low DPR downloads to ratings ratio metric that I use kind of sparingly at this point. If you optimize for that funnel, if you optimize for every download to turn into a rating somehow, then you could have a good amount of ratings coming from those downloads. And the way you would know is, the way you'd know what's the right minimum is if you look at what your competitors are getting, what the keywords that you're in, how those are ranking. If you need 1,000 ratings to be somewhere in there, if you need fewer ratings, if you can find an opportunity. So that's what you want to aim for. So really what you want to do is you want to know your DPR. Your DPR is how many downloads you need for one new rating. And then you need to know how many ratings you need in a 30-day period. And let's say that number is 1,000 and you're already getting 100 on your own. You need 900 downloads. If your DPR is 10, you need 9,000 downloads. Hopefully that makes sense. So now you need to go out there and figure out how to get 9,000 downloads, and that you can easily do with Apple search ads for the most part. Depends on how much money you want to invest, of course, and how much you want to get into optimizing it. But using what we'll do today, you'll be able to at least optimize it a lot better. So every impression or fewer impressions will lead to a download. It's always a ratio of some sort. Let's see if we have any more questions that we can take. More questions, some more questions. Wow, there are a lot of questions. Okay, cool. Let's see. What do we got? Dogo is saying that they love the basic overlay. I do like it too. I came up with it very late at night. And it was just, when it comes to these sort of things, with organic, it's a lot of you try something and either it works or it doesn't. And with paid, you can try something and either it works or it doesn't, but it costs you every time you run an experiment. And that's painful. I have, in my entire life running businesses, I've always been very conscious of every penny that comes in. We're not a venture-backed company. We've never been a venture-backed company. And we just celebrated our 14th birthday. And I have always really thought about every penny. And it doesn't mean that I won't spend on ads. I will, but I want to make sure that every penny, I can stretch it as much as possible. That's just me and how I do everything. So when I see something like Apple Search Ads Basic, which does the exact opposite, it annoys me. It really, really annoys me. I really feel that it's terrible. But a question from Ruth is, what's the best way to get traction on ASA without blowing through money on broad match? We'll talk about broad match in just a few moments. Broad match, in addition to Apple Search Ads Basic, and also another feature that Apple has, are all evil. You should never use broad match. Apple tells you to use broad match, which is infuriating. It's as if Apple is saying, you have a lot of money, go throw it on stuff that's not going to give you any returns. Never do that. Please don't do that. We'll talk about how to not do that and still continue to get real results in just a little bit as we set up a campaign. So next up, another question. What's the best way to find out the maximum to spend on CPA if you have a subscription ad? There should be a basic formula for LTV and then using that number somehow to figure out max CPA? In theory, yes. So that is actually a really good question if you want to think about it from a purely mathematical standpoint, and you really should because it's some money. It will take me too long to explain, so if we have time at the end, I'm going to try and get back to this. If not, I'll leave a comment after the video is done with how I do it and my formula for doing this. I think it's going to be useful. Now, there's another question from Yuri saying, interesting, but I see opposite from what you are saying, running both advanced and basic ads. I'm not entirely sure what that means, Yuri, but please tell me what you mean. Do you see actual meaningful results from basic, or do you see bad results or poor results from advanced? Because good results from basic, I just don't see. Poor results from advanced, I can definitely see, and we're going to talk about how to not do that today. There are too many toggles that Apple tries to turn off for you that you have to turn on, and when you do, everything becomes a little bit better. There's another question that has to do with DPR. What's a good ratings for per download value? What's a good DPR? That's one of those questions that really depends on the competition. You want it to be the lowest, meaning ideally, you want it to be 1. For every download, you get a rating because you can't get more than 1 rating per download. So that's your ideal. I have not seen any app that gets a lot of downloads that can do that ideal. So really want to be the lowest of your competitor set. And I have seen popular apps with very low DPRs. If you go through some of the keyword teardowns that I publish every week, you'll see a bunch of really successful apps with a really low DPR of like 30 or 20 or 50, which is amazing. But then you'll see some of the bigger apps that have no care for any of this. Companies like Amazon that are in the hundreds, which is even worse. So it really depends on who you're competing with. That's kind of the idea. Sean is saying, I have a new app and found a couple medium popularity, low competition keywords while throwing a bunch of money at an exact match campaign for these keywords impact organic ratings. The answer is possibly. You really want to think about what is that DPR that you need to match and what is that number of ratings that you need to match for those keywords to be useful for you. And if you find that to be the case, yes, that could work. Of course, that could work, meaning it's not necessarily going to work. So you want to do it, you want to run it, and you want to see what happens. The good thing about search ads and really any paid ads is as soon as you turn on the campaign, once it's approved, it's running. So you don't have to wait for the algorithm to learn anything like you would with App Store optimization. You don't have to wait for the App Store to change, for competitors to react. You don't have to wait for anything. It just happens automatically and immediately. You do pay the price for this, but you have more immediate results. So if within a day or two, your keywords, your campaign doesn't work, it's probably not going to work. Nothing magical will happen. Where with ASO, it does take a week, sometimes even more, depending on the store you're on, to see any sort of results. So that is something that I would look at. And again, all of these questions that have to do what's a good DPR or how many downloads do I need or how much money should I spend should really be looking at that, at really how the competition is in the store, what they are getting, and how you can beat them. That's really, it always comes down to, you have to outrun the friend with a bear statement that I don't remember how to say. But that's kind of the idea. You just have to be better than them in order to rise up organically. So there's another question from David who's asking, what is your advice for optimizing ratings? I have a guide on this. I will drop a link to it at some point, either in the chat or in the comments. There will be a link to it that you can read. It will take too long to explain. There's also a live stream that I did with Antoine, who has done something similar and took us through how he grew his ratings by, I think, 3,000% or something crazy like that, which was good. Now, there are a bunch of other questions. I am going to try and let's jump into setting up a campaign so I don't run out of time. And if I have more time, I will get back to those questions. Let's see, where is my screen? So my screen is here. We'll take comments off and let's jump into what setting up a new campaign looks like. Now, you might think setting up a new campaign is super easy. Why do we even have to go through it? It's going to be boring. And the answer is only the naming part of setting up campaign is boring. Everything else is interesting. Let me show you what I mean. So this is the page that Apple has for setting up a campaign. If you've set up a campaign, you know. Notice one very important thing, very important thing here, and that is advanced. We're not in basic because in basic, you don't really have any real settings. So please don't do basic. And if you have done basic successfully, please let me know. I have questions about a lot of things, a lot of questions. But we're going to do this in real time. Hopefully, it will just work throughout. So I'm actually going to pick the App Figures app to set this up on, just so we have some context. And here is your first decision. You have to choose what type of campaign you want. Now, this is fairly new. Product pages were very recent. Today tab and search tab also in the last year. And so up until about a year ago, you could only advertise in search results. And that's where I would recommend starting, because everything else here really targets a different type of campaign. So we'll go through them just quickly so you get an idea of why I'm saying this. But Today tab is literally shows up in the Today tab. Really, really expensive and really untargeted, meaning everyone is going to see it, or most people are going to see it. You don't really want most when you are trying to optimize your campaigns. You want precision. You want exactly the people you want to see that, because you want to optimize that conversion rate from someone who sees your ad to someone who downloads your app. That's really the goal here. And we're going to go through and set up a campaign that optimizes for that as much as possible. So not Today tab. Search tab is really the same thing. It's at the top of the search tab before people start typing. I think it's at the top now. It changed recently. And then product pages are Apple's way of finding apps that are similar and placing you as a recommendation in other apps. This one I have to explore a little bit more. It came out pretty recently and I haven't really done much with it. So I would say that might be for a different live stream in the future. But we're going to focus on search results because that is where you would get most of the intent. And again, our goal is to optimize so the right people get to see your ad, and the right people are the people who need your app. So we're going to go with that. And with that, we're going to choose a region. Now, you might be thinking, I want to do everything, right? I want to do all the world, everywhere where people can download my app. The answer is no. You definitely don't want to do that. And the reason you don't want to do that is because every country has its own different, and every society has its own different sets of how to optimize and how to localize for that. Now, if your app is localized for a bunch of different regions, you can cater to more than a single region. I would say if you do that on a per country basis, meaning have multiple campaigns for multiple countries, which is something I'll do. I'll show you at the end. So for here, I'm not going to choose all the countries. I'm just going to choose the US because that's what I'm focused on. I have in the past used multiple countries that speak the same language, and that might seem like a good idea, but in the grand scheme of things, it isn't, because every country behaves just a little bit differently, even the keywords you would select. And if you're selecting keywords that are for the UK and the US at the same time, that means the UK keywords are also going to be competitive on the US market, and you may not get as many downloads. And keep in mind, every time your app is visible and every time someone taps it, that cost per tap number that we're going to be setting very soon is going to be hit, and you're going to lose that money. So every time, if your cost per tap is $1 and you made a mistake and have a bad keyword or an irrelevant keyword, that $1 is going in the shredder. I should have put a shredder here and fake money just so you get the idea, but that's how I see it, and that's really how it is. So let's continue here. That was the really easy part. We'll name this campaign live stream because that's what we're doing right now. And here's another thing, your daily budget. Now, your daily budget is something you can change. Your daily budget should not come necessarily from what you think competitors are doing or anyone else is doing. It should come from what you want to spend. And always what I do, this is a little bit of a tip and a trick, I always multiply the daily budget by 30 because that's really the amount of money that you will be spending on that. So if you don't want to spend more than, let's say, $500, $10 a day is going to get you very close to that, because 10 times 30, 300. So if you think about it that way, $10 is nothing. $300, that's something. And it's the same if you want to do $100 and $3,000. So always think about it in monthly terms. I would say, unless you know that you're going to do a campaign, you're going to burst a campaign, that means spending a lot of money in a very short period of time for maybe a one-day launch or a one-week launch or a one-week update event or something. But we're getting too technical here. If you're just setting up a campaign to get downloads, I would think about it in monthly quantities, monthly amounts, and that's how I would set it, then divided by 30. So back to the campaign. I'm going to set my campaign to $50 per day, and that should get me a bit of stuff. Now, There are techniques to figure out what's the right campaign, what's the right daily budget off of competitors. There's no easy tool to do that, not in Apple Search Ads, of course, and that's something we're working on, actually. I've been promising Apple Search Ad Intelligence for months now, and it's not ready yet, but it will be soon. So once it's ready, I'll show you how to do that, but that's not today. Now, another thing that is really, really important is negative keywords. We're not going to set them up here, but we're going to set them up in the next step. And I'll explain what negative keywords mean and how negative keywords helped us save a bunch of money. But before that, start and end dates. I used to always set start and end dates because I always want to be in control of my campaigns. And you can always go in and change that. But on the Apple side of things, I don't really think you need it. If you are trying to learn how to do this, if you are trying to optimize an existing campaign, ending it is not an optimization. Ending it is kind of an exit. So I don't really worry about that. Again, unless you know that you're doing something very, very specific time-wise. Now, ad groups. When I first started running campaigns, ad groups really, really confused me because what's the difference between an ad group and a campaign? Shouldn't a campaign just be the whole thing? And the answer is kind of, if you want to get really organized and you have a lot of keywords and you want to do multiple keywords that share the same type of campaign, you could create multiple ad groups in one campaign. I don't know many people who do that, maybe just agencies who find it easier to manage. So we're just going to have the one ad group, and we're going to call it main because I like it. Now, I'm going to set my maximum CPT, cost per tap, to $1, and I'll explain why later. I know Apple is saying 4. It's in Apple's benefit to push you to do more keywords and more broad matches and pay more money. So I don't really think that's one of those really important things to pay attention to yet. Well, I'll explain how to change this on a per keyword level in just a little bit. Now, here you can do the same thing. You can set a start and end date. We're not going to do that because that's unnecessary. Now, we're getting on to the really fun part, search match. And for search match, I'm going to pull up Apple's documentation because they say it better than I do, and hopefully you'll understand what I mean. Oh, you have to turn this off. So, understand search match. That's from Apple's documentation. Appear for queries without adding keywords to your search results campaign. How? Just how? How is Apple going to know what's the best for me? And you're saying it's Apple, they have AI and ChatGPT and Magic. No, none of that is actually going to save you money. If you have infinite money, if your bank account just continues to get more money, and for some reason you decide that Apple needs to be the recipient of all of that money with no results, you can do that. I don't think you want to do that. If you wanted to do that, you wouldn't be here. So if you want to make sure that your money is actually well spent on these ads, turn off any sort of automations that Apple might offer you. This is the worst one. And for some reason, Apple turns this on and hides all the other targeting features because this is what the feature offsets. This feature says, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. And they might, but from everything that I've seen, when they try to figure it out, they usually get you in front of people that are completely irrelevant to you. So we're not going to do that. I think that's really, really bad. Turn it off, and we'll continue with setting up our campaign. You can continue reading this, and you will continue to understand what I mean, but we're not going to do that because just don't do it. And if you're thinking, wow, this is getting really complicated, I'm going to have to figure out what all the things are for my campaign. I'm going to have to figure out keywords. I'm going to have to figure out age ranges and demographics and devices. The answer is yes. It's not that difficult. It takes just a little bit of time. But in addition to targeting and focusing your campaign and not throwing away money, it also gives you something to experiment and iterate over, which makes me happy because you know how much I like to experiment. So we'll continue. Now, keywords. This is the core of any campaign, especially after you turned off the search match. So what we want to do is you want to click on here, and here's where everything becomes interesting. Apple will attempt to find keywords that are relevant for us. ASO, definitely relevant. Analytics, definitely relevant. Hootsuite, not at all relevant. Social media management, not at all relevant. So if we had left search match on, we'd probably be paying for these keywords, which mean for the AppFigures app, nothing. AppFigures doesn't do social media management, and AppFigures does not compete with Hootsuite. It does do App Store optimization, and so that could be useful. But that's just one out of a few. And as you continue to go through this, you see that I want to say a good 80 to 90% of these keywords are totally irrelevant. And I only say this because I know. And we're gonna walk through how to make sure that we don't get ranked for those keywords, because Apple will try anyway. So here you have a few options, and your few options are to add keywords pretty much, but not exactly. So let's say we want to do app analytics. We're going to add that. So now we have our max CPT set, and you see that you can change it. So we can change it higher or lower. And you have a match type. Apple should not turn the match type to broad by default. Broad means that it's app analytics or app or analytics, or really something that feels similar using language models. So this means that we're going to spend a lot of money on stuff that, even though this keyword seems very relevant to us, we're an app analytics platform, we're going to get a bunch of hits from things that have to do with either apps, not app analytics, or analytics that have nothing to do with apps. And that's what happened to us when I first started with Apple search ads. We would get hits for social media management and Instagram analytics and all these things. And the other thing is, those are really expensive keywords, because competition on Instagram, way more expensive than competition on apps. And we had to pay that because we wanted to compete, not knowing that they would place us on the wrong keywords. So always turn your keywords to exact match. And you see, it adds those brackets. And visually for me, every time I see a keyword and I don't see brackets, I freak out, because I know it's going to cost me money that I don't want to spend on stuff that's not going to give me a return. So if you see, train yourself, if you see a keyword that doesn't have brackets, you know you're in trouble and you want to change it. So let's continue. Now, there are a whole bunch of different techniques to figuring out which keywords you should be adding. I'm going to go through that very, very quickly with the one tool, one of my favorite tools, and that's going to be the competitors keywords report in App Figures. If you go into the competitors keywords report in App Figures, you'll see that you can set up any competitors, and you can choose literally any competitors, and all those competitors, from all of those competitors, you're going to get all of the keywords that they have. And what that will allow you to do is that will allow you to have ideas, to see what sort of keywords they're targeting, maybe new ideas, maybe things that can help you understand how you can get to keywords. Now, those are all organic keywords, which means that those are all keywords that you will find them optimizing for organically through App Store optimization, through their name, through their subtitle on the App Store. They're not going to be the keywords they bid on. We're also building a view that will give you an idea of what keywords they're paying money for. But I think ultimately, if you think about intent, it's not just about the paid intent. It's about intent in general. And so you want to take from the name, from the subtitle, more than you want to take from what they're paying for. What they're paying for might be interesting, but what the algorithm sees them as, that's really where the key to all of this is. So I've gone through this in a whole bunch of live streams, and I have videos on it and guides. I will link to those guides below so you have an idea of how to do it, because otherwise I'm going to run out of time. I just looked at how much time we have. And so let's continue, and we'll talk about negative keywords, because negative keywords are important. So I'm going to save this. We have our one keyword. Great. Now, negative keywords. So remember how I said before that when we started advertising, when we were not using exact match, we were getting Instagram analytics and social media, and you saw what Apple recommended. I'm going to make sure that we don't get any sort of, we don't get shown for anything that has to do Instagram, because we really don't do much with Instagram. And so Instagram, done. I'm going to set this one to broad because I don't really want anything Instagram related. I don't want Instagram analytics or analytics for Instagram or followers for Instagram. And Apple is so easily swayed by these things, so they will expand everything. That's really a problem, and you should always be mindful of that. So always pick your keywords with exact match and add negative keywords. I also know that social media is something that Apple will attempt to do for us. Now, for social media, I am going to do an exact match because it's 2 words, and I don't know what the algorithm is going to do. I don't necessarily want to throw away some of that traffic. So continue and add those negative keywords. Those will be here. Make sure you add as many negative keywords as you can, because ultimately, it's easier to remove a negative keyword and spend more money than to get your money back from Apple for a tap that did nothing for you. Actually, you can't get your money back for a tap that did nothing for you. So that's where that really, really ends. Now let's continue. We're close. The audience. The audience is a very, very interesting tab as well. So reach all eligible users means literally anyone who's in the App Store. They could be your existing users. They could be users that already had your app. There are a bunch of different ways that they can do it. Actually, I skipped ahead. We'll get to that in a second. That's customer types. With the specific audiences, you have a lot of control. And if you come from a background of doing this campaign type of really anywhere else, you will know that you have targeting options. Facebook used to have tons of targeting options, making it super easy to get exactly to the right user and not spend the money. And that's why Facebook used to be the preferred way of advertising up until app tracking transparency really kicked it. So I always choose specific audiences because I want to know who I'm targeting. And again, that goes back to I want to be able to experiment. So setting to that, we're going to start with devices. This is a really easy one. This gives you the ability to select if your app is on multiple devices. Our app is made for iPhone, so we don't really have any options. It's all blacked out. We're going to continue. Customer types, which is what I started talking about before. Here you have a few options. And these options are a little bit tricky, and they make the tracking a little bit tricky, just a side note. So all users means literally all users, anyone who's in the App Store, existing users, new users, people who had your app, people who have your app on a different device, all of those count for all users. I don't think you really want that in most cases. Now, there are some branded campaigns where you just want people to see the name of your app in front of their faces, even if they're not going to download it. That's probably good for that. That's how you throw money away, and you do that if you're a big brand that just wants that brand recognition. If you're trying to save your money and stretch your dollars, you want to go for new users. New users means exactly what it sounds like, users who have never used your app. Now, the language for these is kind of interesting, but users of my other apps also means exactly what you think. They have one of your apps if you have multiple apps. So it's a much smaller kind of audience, which is really, really cool if you already have that sort of brand recognition. And this should be one of the most optimized campaigns with the highest conversion rate. If you have a campaign that targets your other users and you have enough users in that group, I believe Apple says you need to have at least 5,000 users in that group for that to work. If you have that, that could be really, really good. I'm going to skip that because it's not the main use case for most apps. We only have the one app, and even if we release other apps, I'm not going to try and do that. I would much rather target newer users and use my own apps to push more traffic to my apps. So keep it in the family within my app. I don't necessarily want to spend the money on that. There is a way to use this to prevent competitors from advertising on your app's name. I think all of that is shenanigans, and I can talk about that again in like an advanced don't target your competitor names live stream later. But I normally try not to do this either. I really aim for new users. Now, this is kind of tricky. So returning users is not exactly just returning users. If you read the documentation, returning user says that it's anyone who had your app in the past or has your app on a different device, not this device. But if you continue reading the documentation, it also says that it could be users that have your app. I'm not entirely sure if that's a mistake. I've caught mistakes in the documentation before, but something to keep in mind. The really interesting bit here is if you're tracking this, and of course you should be, these are not going to count as downloads because they're returning users. And if you have tracked your analytics for more than 2 minutes, you know that returning users will count as a re-download. So if you're doing any sort of tracking and you're paying money for these ads and you're not seeing new downloads and you have this campaign, this customer type selected, that's exactly why. So I don't really see a lot of use for this. Of course, there is use for this, but it's very, very niche and very specific, and I would much rather not use it. So we're going to go for new users. Which is what I think will give us the most bang for our buck, and we're going to drop down to demographics. Now, thinking of the genders and the age ranges of apps, especially when you don't know these pieces of data, might be really challenging. Now, there aren't that many options. In Apple Land, there are male and female, and for ages, we have what looks like every group. There's a little bit of a quirk here. This is not an age range, this is just a number, but once you select one, it will give you another one. I don't know why, but that's cool. So what I always do is I always aim to understand who I'm targeting, and it's better to narrow your targeting and expand it later than to have it too broad. And when it's too broad, again, you're just losing money on potential. Unpotential is not a word, but you're losing money on people who will see your app that don't need it. So it's very difficult to decide on genders, I know for me at least, because who uses analytics more, males or females? But there are apps that are more targeted towards males or females. And so if you have that sort of app, it would be very beneficial to target it. Now, again, you can always untarget that and continue from there. It's also one of those things that you probably don't know about your app because there's no easy way to look it up. Apple doesn't give you any sort of tools for this, and you just don't see it. But we are working on something as well that uses some AI to figure that out, to give you an idea of who's using your app using public data. So it's going to be very easy, and you can see that for your competitors, and you can learn from that and potentially also optimize those campaigns a little bit better. That's gender. Age is a lot different because age is likely something you know or likely something you can expect. I know that when I do advertising, I don't go too young because that's not going to help with analytics. Most people who are thinking about their app as a business are not going to be too young. Now there might be people there that I'm overlooking when I do this, but for the most part it's not going to be them, I don't want to lose that money. Same thing with higher age ranges, and depending on the app, that would make a lot of sense. But for example, news apps, you want to cater to a higher age group because that's just how it is. Or if you're trying to change how news apps are, like some apps are trying to do these days, you want to only target the lower end of age. So think about what that means for you and find the right age. And again, keep in mind, it's better to focus your app too much in the beginning and then broaden it, because that means you're not wasting money and you're getting results, and slowly broaden it. That's how I would do it. That's how I do everything. So that's really important. Locations. So locations are subset of the region you selected. We selected the US, so if we do want to show it in a specific city or in a specific state, we can do that too. It doesn't really make sense for the App Figures app to be siloed to a specific state or city, but there are many apps where this actually does make sense. If you have an app that's local or you have an app that's not catering to all locations, a lot of the food delivery apps from maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago that used to start in one region and go from there, start in a few cities, like the big cities like New York and Boston, and maybe San Francisco, they would use the location targeting to make sure that they're not showing up in rural Alabama and are not getting downloads, even worse, getting downloads and getting negative reviews, getting bad customer support because they don't work there. So for me, not relevant, but we can use that if we need to. And then we're getting close to the end, and also we're almost running out of time, but ad scheduling, this is probably not something that I would say everyone should use, but if you want to be really, really clever and really stretch your dollars, that's what I would use in conjunction with ASO. So what I would do, and I've done this before, it's interesting. It does take a lot of tweaking to get done right, but you can do it. So what you would do is you would go into your keyword performance report for your most important keywords, the ones where hopefully you're also ranking in very well. If you're ranking in very well, when you look at, let's say, the last 30 days or maybe last 2 weeks, in hourly granularity, you will see that you probably go up and down, especially if you're number 1 or in the top 5 or in the top 3. And for most apps, maybe that's not going to be the case, but for some apps, that is going to be the case. Business apps, utilities, things that are needed during certain hours, awake hours, because we're now siloed to a specific country that has probably one range of when it's daylight. And if you have that, every time you dip, you want to augment that with Apple Search Ads. So you only do Apple Search Ads when your app dips in organic results. That's very tinkery, and there are many techniques to figure out how to do it, because unless you have a perfect seasonality by day or by hour, it may not make sense. But also could be very, very useful. If you don't do it by hours, you can still do it by day. And so this is a really, really powerful feature. I really like it. It doesn't fit everyone. It's probably not for everyone, but I can talk about that separately. I should definitely take all this. As I'm talking about this, I want to take all this and turn it into a guide, to like a really in-depth guide that goes into in-depth for everything. So I'll probably make more videos and attach them to that guide whenever that happens. That's going to be really fun. Let's continue. Let's see what we still have. So ad creatives, this is yet another fun thing, but we're not going to get too much into this because now we're getting into graphics and visualizations and what people see. But Apple does give you the ability to use different screenshots when you do paid ads, and this is probably the topic for a whole other live stream. And I actually did do a live stream, I want to say last summer, maybe a little bit before, on localization and A/B testing, which was pretty awesome. We had a really awesome guest. He brought some really good results from campaigns they ran for Google, which I thought was just mind-blowing to see how much work they put into it and what sort of minimal changes they ended up with that had amazing results. I'll link to that as well in the description later in a comment so you can see it. So here we're just going to go with the simple default, which means whatever graphics we show on the page, on the App Store page, we're going to show here. Now, you can do a custom product page for this, which is cool. Too advanced to get into right now, so we're not going to get into it. Maybe in the future. If you want me to talk about custom product pages, especially in the context of search ads, let me know. And we're going to hit Create Campaign. And boom, we're done, kind of. So this campaign is now going to start running. I'm going to pause it because I don't want it to run right now. And you can see all of my campaigns and how I set them up. I set up a whole bunch of different campaigns, and I do them at different amounts and different granularities. And mostly for me, it's for testing things. You can probably tell by the amounts which one is the right campaign and which one I was just trying new things with. So that's pretty much how you set up a campaign. And again, if you want the summary of everything is you want to target, you don't want automation, you want to control who the ads are shown to, and you want to show it to the narrowest amount of people. And you can always expand, but if you start narrow, you will know a lot more. Now, there's one more thing that a lot of people forget. I'm not sure how a lot of people forget, and that is you want to also make sure that you track all of these results all the time. This is even more important than tracking App Store optimization keyword ranks because this is something that costs you money. And when you don't do it well enough, it just costs you money and that money goes away. And it doesn't matter if you're a big company or a small company or an indie. Money is money and you want to keep it and you want it to do more for you. If you could get 2 downloads for the price of 1, would you do it? If you can pay half and get the same number of downloads, would you do it? All those are possible when you do targeting. And targeting means tracking. So in Apple search ads, you can track which keywords are giving you most money. You can track how money is translating into downloads. I know a lot of developers don't do it because Apple made it just a little bit tricky. And again, I totally get it. They want you to spend as much money on keywords as possible because that benefits everyone. Everyone. But if you head into App Figures, there is a very simple view where you can overlay your downloads and you can overlay your spend, or really any of the metrics that we track from Apple search ads. You can do that for basic. You can do that for advanced, but you're not going to use basic, so we're not going to worry about that, even though we do support it. And you can overlay really any other metric. So for the people who asked me before about ratings, you can overlay your ad spend and your downloads, the downloads you paid for with ads. You can overlay that on top of ratings or overlay new ratings on top of it. And you can see if those two are changing as you would expect. You can do that for downloads. You can do that for revenue. And you should do that for all of those because that will give you a really good understanding of how your ad spend is actually changing your trends. And if it's not changing enough, you can do more. That's when you start changing your campaign budgets, your cost per tap amounts, add more keywords, remove keywords, block keywords, negative keywords. That's really where you do all of that. So that was it. Pretty much. That's how you set up a campaign. Honestly, it shouldn't take as long as it took me to explain it to set it up right, especially if you know what you're going for. But if you spend an hour setting up a campaign that's going to be really good, that's an hour amazingly well spent. We haven't even reached that. So for people who are thinking this will take too long, I don't really want to do this, let Apple Magic do all the work. You can, but you're really not going to get the same type of results. And what you're going to see is results that take your money and don't give you as many downloads as you could be getting. And you might be getting a good, decent number of downloads now without any optimization. That just means that you can either cut the amount that you spend on it or get more downloads than what you're getting now for the same amount, which to me always sounds good. It's worth it. So let me go back, and now it's time for more questions, and I think we have a whole bunch. So let's see what we got. Where is my mouse? My mouse has disappeared. No, I found my mouse. Okay. So, well, we have a lot of questions. I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as possible in the less than 10 minutes that I have. Actually, before I even get into that, I did promise that we will have a promo code If you want to use those competitor keywords report, that competitor keywords report that I mentioned, where you can select really any app in the App Store or Google Play right now and see all of the organic keywords where they're found. And soon in the future, you'll also be able to see the paid keywords where they pay money for through Apple Search Ads. Head on to App Figures and use this code, which I have here now on the screen. And this will work for the next week, I think. So if you're watching this video, the recording will be available. All of the live streams are available on our YouTube channel. YouTube does that by default, so it's perfect. If you're watching this 2 weeks from now, for 2 weeks from now, people, it's probably not going to work. Or 1 week from now, people, not going to work. But if you're watching this live, this will work and will give you 30% off on the optimized plan or above, which is what you would need to see competitor keywords. Some people ask me how many competitors can you see keywords for? The answer is unlimited. We have no limits. And so there is some competitive intelligence stuff that is only available unlimited, but not this one, because keywords are so essential to making money. So check this out. I'm going to remove this from the screen and we'll go from there. So back to questions. Where are questions here? Let's see. I'm going to try to get through these as quickly as I can. I am new in Apple Search Ads. How much should I spend on my app to reach positive ROI stage? I think I answered that already as I was going through it. That's usually where I would start with those numbers that I was showing before. Those are kind of decent enough to get something. And from there, you can understand if you should be spending more or less. A question from Richard. This, I think, is related to when we talked about ratings. When should you ask for a written review versus when should you ask for Apple's quick rating prompt? Always ask for a quick rating prompt. I think written reviews, while great, don't really have that sort of impact and are so much more frictionful to get people to do that. Always ask for a rating. That's really all that matters when it comes to optimization. Dogu is saying, I personally use broad keyword matching for keyword discovery, then check the keywords that I got downloads from and add them to my exact match list. Is this a bad approach as well? So this is the approach that Apple tells you to do if you read their documentation. They say do a discovery campaign. A discovery campaign is going to have a bunch of broad matches that will kind of just spread the app around. The real problem with that I see is that's going to cost you money. So if you have $1,000 to spend on ads, you probably want to spend enough for this discovery to work. And let's say out of the $1,000, it's probably going to be $300, $400, because it's at less than $10 a day at $1 per tap. It's going to be very difficult. So if you have $1,000, you already spent 30% on just ideas. That to me is just wasteful. So you can do it if you have the funding to do it. And in the old world, back in the day before the days of search ads, it was kind of common for agencies to do about 20 to 25% on like weird discovery projects or A/B testing or stuff like that. But you do that when you have $100,000 to spend, not necessarily when you have $10,000 or $50,000. In my opinion. Now, as you grow and you spend more, that number is going to be really high. So if you can get a tool that costs you a few $100 and it would give you ideas like what we're building, that would outweigh this, in my opinion. And that's kind of how I do it. Ruth is asking, what's the best practice to find new keywords if your discovery campaign isn't showing you anything new or they appearing as unknown? So that's exactly what I meant when I said head into App Figures, head into the competitors keywords report in the ASO section and put in your competitors or put in similar apps. They don't have to be direct competitors. Those are the keywords that you want to target, and that's not going to cost you any cost per tap. Leonardo is asking, should you ever use broad match campaigns to discover new keywords? So all these answers are pretty much the same. Ever is kind of a limited term, so I wouldn't say never. I think I wouldn't use it for that purpose. I don't think that it makes sense. If you have money to burn, maybe. I don't think it's worth it. Next up, TC is asking, is ratings quantity or ratings ratio more important for ASO? It's quantity. It's quantity time and time again. If you read keyword teardowns, you'll see what I mean. And now, it doesn't mean that if you have more ratings, you'll always rank better for all the keywords. It doesn't. It's a combination, a healthy balance of keyword optimization, meaning targeting the right keywords and targeting them right, and also having ratings. So you want to do both. Seems like asking for ratings right at the onboarding didn't work for me. Anyone else? If that didn't work for anyone else, drop it in the chat. I think that's a terrible idea because You ask for a rating when someone is happy. You ask for a rating when someone wants to rate it. You ask for a rating once when they just open the app. They're going to be like, no, I don't know. Maybe this app is good. Maybe this app is bad. I'm not going to know anything about it. Oh, yeah. So Luke is saying the same thing. How can users judge your app without knowing it? That's precisely what it is. A general question from Nathan, a bit more general question for a new app. Do you think it's better to focus first on user acquisition or user retention? And the other then. It's a really tough question. I think you should focus on user retention when you build the app to begin with, meaning as you build the app, you should know what would happen if a user, or what the retention funnel looks like. And you should design around that to begin with, because changing things for retention is a lot more difficult for you than user acquisition. So I would say user acquisition when you launch, before launch, user retention. And then once you have enough user acquisition, make sure that you continue to focus on user retention. What I do is pre-launch, think about user retention, think about what's going to happen, build in the right metrics to track it, then focus on user retention, and then just make sure that that metric you have for retention is not terrible, meaning it's not that 1 in 2 users churn. And if that is the case, go and focus on user retention. As long as that's not the case, continue to build the top of the funnel and then worry about the rest, because you worried about it before, not because you're ignoring it. Luke is saying pre-rating filter worked for us. Wait a bit for engagement and then do it. Makes a ton of sense. And again, I will link to a live stream I did with Antoine from Swiftly, and he has a bunch of interesting things to say about when to ask and how to ask. And he really grew his ratings. I believe we show that on the screen. It was humongous. So Igor saying, we have successful experience with ASA Basic, but I agree that it will only work for very specific types of apps, maybe 5% of possible apps out there. I will move that decimal point a little bit to the left and say maybe 0.5%. But it's good that you got good results out of it. That's kind of amazing. I would love to know what the app is and how you got results out of it and what sort of a campaign you ran. So if you want to drop that in the comments, or if you want to email me directly or hit me up on Twitter, I would just love to hear what that's like. Apple Search Ads or Google Ads, which platform do you suggest for iOS app marketing? Obviously Apple Search Ads, because that's where the intent is. It doesn't mean that Google Ads is not good, but you will find people with either a slightly different intent or a different type in their flow, meaning in what they're looking for. So I don't know if I would use that. I would much rather use Apple Search Ads. There are a lot more questions, and I do not have any time. I think I officially ran out of time. So I will try to take all these questions. I think this is the most questions that I had unanswered in a live stream. So I will take all these questions, and I will answer them in the comments once this is done right after. So come back in an hour, and hopefully you will have your question answered. If I don't get to your question, hit me up on Twitter or send me an email, and I will try to answer that as well. I think this is really great. This is really cool, but I just don't have the time. So I'll do that later. And I already have a whole bunch of ideas for the follow-up to this. We can talk about keyword and keywords and how to find them. We can talk about competitor names. We have all these things that we can talk about. So I think that would be really, really cool. For now, I think it's time to say goodbye. Hopefully you learned something new. If you did, give this video a like, because we have to tell the YouTube algorithm that this is great and more people should see it. And consider subscribing to the channel. I'm going to put up the promo code in case you didn't see it before. And again, this will be on for about a week. I don't think we have any limits on it, so go wild. This is for Optimize and above. Hopefully that will help you find more keywords and use those keywords to save money on your search ads or make your search ads campaign go the distance. That's all I have for you today. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Again, if you did, give the video a like. I can do this. Otherwise, I will see you in a couple of weeks where I might be talking about Apple Search Ads again. We have a guest planned, and we will talk about more specifics, not how to do it, but mostly how others are doing it. It's going to be really cool. And on that happy note, I will say bye, 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 bye. See you all later.